As a kid in the 80s, what we wanted most as gamers was to be able to have the arcade experience in the comfort of our own homes. And early on, Sega had attempted this with the Sega Master System, bringing cool ports of their arcade hits home, but it just couldn't compete with the awesomeness of the Nintendo Entertainment System. Then 1989 came. That October, Sega released the Genesis, a 16-bit system that promised to give gamers what we truly wanted, the arcade experience at home. And for most of us, that Christmas, under the tree, we had finally gotten what we wanted all of those years in the form of the pack-in game, Altered Beast. Altered Beast is an arcade classic, but I do see a lot of videos today that question its choice as the pack-in title for the Sega Genesis. And I'll agree, it wasn't the best choice. It was the perfect choice. Sega, from the Master System days, they learned the hard way that tech specs alone weren't going to give them a chance against the Nintendo juggernaut. If they wanted this new 16-bit system to succeed, they needed to show, not tell what it could do, and appeal to an audience of teens and preteens now who had previously chosen the NES over the Master System. And Sega was at a disadvantage because Nintendo, of course, had Mario, while Sega's closest things to a mascot was a nondescript monkey boy and a sentient spaceship with wings and feet. So when it came to choosing a pack-in title, it was a choice between those or a bona fide smash arcade hit like Altered Beast to show off what their new system could really do. The choice was a no-brainer. And by 1989, at this point, gaming had evolved quite a bit from where it was. During the height of Pac-Man fever in the early 80s and through the Atari 2600 era, gaming, especially arcade games, were all about getting the high score and getting to put your initials in on the screen at the end. But I remember even as a child playing Pac-Man and even talking to friends about it, we weren't as concerned about what our score was as we were about winning. As about seeing what would come next. How far could we get? How many stages could we clear? That was what was important to us. And that was where gaming had gone with the NES and console gaming becoming more commonplace. So when the NES came out, Nintendo truly gave us that. Scoring was still a part of games, and I think it should be. But here, we had Super Mario Brothers, where there was a whole world to explore and an end goal to reach. You would beat the game. And Sega was known for their arcade games, but arcade games and consoles are two very different animals, two very different markets. And while just getting the high score was great for arcades, at home we wanted something more in depth. We wanted to beat the game. So in 1988, when Altered Beast was originally released in arcades, beat-em-ups were becoming incredibly popular. And these were all games that you could play through. These were games you could play through and reach the end of in the arcade, one quarter at a time if you needed to. But to bring that straight over to a home console version was going to leave gamers wanting. Because arcade games, as much as I love them, then and now, they didn't have the same depth that we'd become accustomed to, that we expected our console games to have, where we would want to play for longer, where we would want to explore, not bound by the limitations of the quarters in our pocket. And this is where the big differences between the arcade and the Genesis versions of Altered Beast really come into play. The arcade version, it knows what it is. It's a solid game, but it's there to extract quarters from your pocket. It starts off hard. It comes at you. If you don't know what you're doing, it's very unforgiving. Whereas the Genesis version is a lot friendlier. It's a lot easier to pick up, start playing, power up, and honestly, the controls are better with the Genesis than they are with the original arcade version. And I believe Sega understood they were dealing with two different mindsets and two different markets going between the arcade and the home port of the arcade game. So there was this need to cater the same game to both while still fulfilling that promise of bringing the arcade home. In the arcade, like I said, you could play through Altered Beast just by dropping in quarters. And every time you did, the game would encourage you. Never give up. But on the Genesis, due to both gameplay choices and technical limitations, they removed the continues entirely. And even though the Genesis seems easier at first, this actually made the game more challenging than the arcade in its own unique way. And sure, with practice, you could beat it. And that was a great feeling because the arcade and the Genesis versions have two different endings. But with the Genesis, you really have to work for it. And that's what made this version great and a perfect pack-in. Because while it did feel easier and more welcoming to new players than the arcade did in terms of control and accessibility, removing continues maintained and elevated the challenge. Altered Beast is a very short game, and with infinite continues on the Genesis version, that would have absolutely killed the replay value. You wouldn't have spent all day Christmas morning playing it. You would have been done in 15 to 20 minutes. And that would have made it a terrible pack-in choice and a terrible port. But instead, by removing the continues while making certain aspects of the gameplay easier, it became a lot easier for players to learn patterns and improve their skills and really dive deep into Altered Beast in a way the arcade version didn't, even if you had a sock full of quarters. Sega increased the replay value of a very good but very short arcade game, and at the same time made a perfect showpiece for what the Genesis could do and what it was capable of. But they also knew they couldn't just rely on arcade ports. If they wanted this to really be something, if they wanted to compete against Nintendo, and Sega would continue to evolve along with the gaming landscape, shaping it during the Genesis era by giving us one of the best RPGs ever with Phantasy Star 2, one of the most unique and fun games ever with Toe Jam and Earl, and of course the platforming perfection of Sonic the Hedgehog when they finally figured out that whole mascot thing. But it all started Christmas morning, 1989, when me and millions of other kids went to look under the Christmas tree and opened that present to find their Genesis systems with that Altered Beast transformation screen there on the box, plugging it in and hearing those immortal words. Wise from your grave. And that wasn't just Altered Beast's hero rising. It was Sega finally rising to face the challenge of Nintendo. And gaming would never be the same. What are some of your favorite gaming memories from the Genesis era? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.